Inflation, part of our lecture series on inflation. Uh, and I start this with a quote from Ronald Reagan, who says, "Inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and as deadly as a hitman." In this video, we're going to discuss how to define money and how to define inflation. We'll also discuss the rule of 70. I have another quote here from a sort of forgotten movie from 20 years ago where Danny DeVito, as a character, says, "Everyone needs money. That's why it's called money." This is a joke. We don't actually have that etymology for money, but this kind of gets the idea of how central money is, of course, to our economy. Yet we've gone most of the way through this class without really talking about what are the characteristics of money. And we're going to fix that right now because there are three roles for money. Money is a unit of account, it's a medium of exchange, and it's a store of value. And I don't really recommend that you memorize very much from this class, but I do recommend that you memorize this. It is something that all economists can kind of rattle off with no problem. So I would encourage you to memorize this definition. So what do these three things mean? What does money mean as a unit of account? Money gives us a consistent way to communicate the price of goods. If you think about a system where there is no money, like some sort of barter system, it would quickly become apparent to you after about 4 or 5 imaginary barter trades that that's just so clumsy a way to try to manipulate goods or trade goods between people that money, some sort of money or some sort of exchange rate would naturally arise. And that's one of the things that money, one of the roles that money performs. We know what the price is of all goods because all goods are denominated in money. Secondly, money is a medium of exchange. Money, um, money is a way to pay for things. In the U.S., it is a way to pay for everything. Now, you know, on every U.S. Currency, paper currency, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And it is illegal in the US to not accept dollars in payment of a debt. And of course, this means that if we walk into a store, we know we can pay with US dollars. Now, the courts have, by the way, you might be thinking right now about sort of these cashless stores that do not accept cash. And what the courts have ruled is that if you're buying something, you aren't paying off a debt yet. So cashless stores are okay. Yeah, but if you owe someone money, they must accept dollars in payment of that debt. So you know if someone says that you owe them a Bitcoin, you borrow a Bitcoin from them, you can pay them off in dollars, and they have to be okay with that. That's how that works as a medium of exchange. Finally, as a store of value. Here I have a picture of a wallet with dollar bills in it. And this is something we don't think about very much, but at the end of the day, when you go home at night or you go back to your dorm room at night, you go home with money, with cash in your wallet. You know that tomorrow you can wake up and that cash will be worth approximately the same amount, that you'll still be able to spend it. Think about uh, a $20 bill and a coupon for a free coffee at Starbucks, and think that you misplaced both of them at the bottom of all of your clothes, and you kind of forget about them. And then, like 2 years later, you find both the coupon and the $20 bill. You won't be able to use the coupon because it's expired, but you will be able to use the $20 bill because money is a store of value. And those are the three definitions that we have. And I have another example of that. I said a Happy Meal, and so we can look at that in the slides as well. So now that we know how we define money, we should think about how we define inflation. Inflation is an overall rise in prices or an overall rise in the price level. Now, it's important that this is overall. This doesn't mean that one good like gasoline goes up a lot in price, that's not an overall rise in the price level. Not even if it's a whole sector of goods, not even if, let's say, all produce goes up in price. That's not an indicator of inflation. Inflation is an overall rise in the price level. And so we can think about the definition of money as a unit of account, as a medium of exchange, and as a store of value. So we think about inflation and a rise in the price level as a unit of account. That means that actually our unit of account, the way we think about prices, is constantly changing due to inflation happening in our economy. Now, currently our inflation is happening at an extremely low rate, so we don't see that happening constantly, but it is constantly, the overall price level is rising very, very, very slowly. We can think about inflation affecting the medium of exchange in the sense that if someone loans you $20 and you don't have to pay it back for 20 years, 20 years from now, that $20 will have less value than it does currently. Finally, probably the most direct impact of inflation on this definition for money is as a store of value. Because inflation keeps raising the price level, money keeps having less and less value. So a $20 bill now, like I said, when you find it 2 years later, will actually buy you a little less 2 years from now than it does now. And so that's how inflation impacts all three of these parts of the definition of money. Now, usually if I'm teaching this class live, people will ask at this point about cryptocurrency or about Bitcoin. And so let me spend a moment or two talking about cryptocurrency and how we conceive of cryptocurrency as opposed to the money that I've talked about so far. So cryptocurrency is a type of digital asset. I say it's a currency here. I'm not so sure about that, but it's a asset that exists online. And for most of these digital currencies, there's a transparent record of transactions. So everyone can see every transaction that's occurred. And typically this comes in the form of what's called a blockchain. And the fact that it's transparent and it's a blockchain means that anyone can verify the transactions in this. It is possible to have blockchains that not everyone sees, but of course that kind of defeats the purpose of having this kind of setup. But if everyone can independently verify transactions, that means that ownership of cryptocurrency is not vested in one body or one bank or one organization. It's distributed through all the users of that cryptocurrency. A term I took from Wikipedia is that cryptocurrency is pseudonymous. In other words, it's tied to an address. It's not tied to an individual person, so it provides some level of anonymity for people that are using this digital currency. And finally, because it was made by programmers, it doesn't have any direct government control. Most of this cryptocurrency not under any direct government control, although, of course, people using Bitcoin in the United States or in any country are subject to those countries' laws about transactions over the internet. So here is the graph of the value of Bitcoin from its adoption in mid-2010. And what you'll see is since 2017, there have been sort of three big spikes in Bitcoin value and then a couple crashes in value as well. And so we need to ask, if we're asking, is Bitcoin, a particular cryptocurrency, is that a currency? We have to ask if Bitcoin is a store of value. Now, some people use it as a medium of exchange, especially for things that are illegal to purchase in many locations. And it can be a unit of account, but the unit of account and the store of value, it's a little complex when there's this much volatility in the asset to say whether it's a currency or not. I'm not going to take a position on it. It's really up to you to think about whether you think it's currency or not, or whether you think people are investing in Bitcoin not for the currency aspect of it, but because they think it will appreciate in value. And if they're doing that, then they're really treating Bitcoin more as an asset and less as a currency, less as money. So let me talk about the rule of 70. And the rule of 70 is a nice shorthand to take any percentage rate and figure out that if that percentage rate applies going forward, how long it would take an initial investment to double or an initial price to double. So here we're using inflation, so we're going to use the price level. So what we do is we divide 70 by that rate, by whatever the inflation rate is. And then we get the number of years that it would take to double. So if we say that the inflation rate is 2%, that means we think the price level rises 2% per year. And if we divide 70 by 2, which is the percentage rate, we get 35. So the prices double. If we have 2% inflation the whole time, prices will double about every 35 years. Roughly, you can think about if you have an investment just this year, and you think that investment's going to make like 4% per year, $1,000 invested this year would double about, if I said 4%, it would double about every 13, 14, 15, 16, about 16 and a half years. And so if you put money away today to get to use in your retirement, let's say 48 years from now, that money is going to triple over that time. And so you can sort of see why putting away money for retirement is important. And that's just one investment. Here is a graph of the inflation rate since 1957. And what I want to show you here, and some of you may have heard this already from a live class that I've done, is I want you to notice that this graph is basically a graph of two halves. The first half goes from 1957 all the way up to about 1983. And what you'll see in the first, it's really more like the first 40% of this graph, is you'll see that there are sort of big peaks where there are large percentage rate changes. In other words, in 1975, the inflation rate was over 10%, which meant that something that was $1 in 1974 cost $1.10 in 1975. And so you see these kinds of large inflation rates through the 70s and 80s. Now, the reason that the second half of this graph looks much more stable is due to a man named Paul Volcker. These gray areas on this graph are years where the U.S. was in a recession, and the one wide gray area around 1983 was when Paul Volcker raised interest rates, so he made it more expensive to borrow money, which plunged the economy into a deep recession. And the result of going into this deep recession was that he was able, because he was the president of the Federal Reserve, get control over the inflation rate. And so what we've had since 1983 for almost 40 years has been what we call the Great Moderation. And this is a time period where inflation has historically been very low. It's not common in, since 1950 or so that we've had this kind of low inflation rate, but this is what we've been able to achieve since 1983, and that's thanks essentially to one man and his courage to plunge the economy into a recession, knowing that there were going to be large future gains, or concluding that there would be large future gains from doing so. So money is a medium of exchange, a unit of account, and a store of value. Inflation is the overall rise in the price level, and the rule of 70 is to take 70 and divide it by whatever percentage rate you're talking about to get the rough idea of the number of years it would take for the money you're talking about to double. Thank you.